Well, that's the thing I notice about cons as I get older is there are fewer and fewer of the folks I was used to seeing. It seems to be. I mean, I guess it was at the time too. It's just a younger audience. It's easier for younger people to get out, get the table, make the flights, do the hotel, do all that. And folks get older. They have more obligations, family, more difficult to travel, health, whatever. So it's definitely not the SPX it was, say, in 2009, but it's still a very interesting thing. It's just
you've got a lot more energy to do things like comics on the side when you're younger.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Yeah, a lot of people have to you have to have a job in this most people have to have work anyway, and it's not, as you get older, you don't have the energy for both. And it's making comics is pretty rough. It's tough. There's very little income in it. For most people, it's you have to do it because you love it, and even if you do love it, sometimes you just don't have the time or energy for it.
I had Dan Klaus on the show recently, and he's obviously about as on the top of one's game as one can possibly be, and he still needs to do illustration. I think he told me at one point, I don't know if it's probably an interview that I did a while back, but that the most of his income comes from selling original pages.
Really? I think from what I know, it's similar with Ware and those guys. They're able to sell their pages for they tend to do okay with it. I'm the same, but I'm not able to sell my pages at Klaus Ware levels. But a lot of my income besides freelance comes from being able to sell original art. And I've been asked why I don't give digital art a try. And while I personally have nothing against digital art, one, it's I would have to relearn how to do everything, a lot of aspects of drawing, but in the end, I wouldn't have a physical piece to show for my efforts that I'd be able to sell.
Yeah, I was reading through your blog, very, very candid, which I appreciate. And one of the things you had said is there was a point in your life when you really consciously made the decision that this was the thing that you were going to do full time. How long ago was that?
Well, I've always wanted it.
Sure.
Yeah. But it became possible when I left Chicago. My wife and I met in Chicago, and we were kind of at a crossroads where we could either move back to Japan, where she was from, or move back to where I was from, where we could focus on being, she's a ceramicist, so we both wanted to focus on our art. And I grew up in Northwest Missouri, and I'm here now. It's my family has land. Farmland, not a lot, but we were able to take a corner of it and build a house. And I tried teaching for a while to keep having a job, and the older I get, the more I realize I just wasn't capable of holding down a regular job because of neurodivergence. And I was like, well, one thing I feel that is a strength of mine is making comics, as far as from my perspective. And I've just been determined to make it work all of my life. And I say 11 years ago was the last time I had a job, like a go in to, deal with the boss kind of job. And I've been trying to make it work ever since. It's been much more difficult these last few years with the pandemic and everything else that's been going on sociopolitically. It's freelance work is more difficult to come by, and ways of making it work are more difficult to come by. So I have to, like many artists, I have to turn towards asking for help, which I've set up a GoFundMe type thing just to help making comics for now, while I get what freelance work I can done. But there's ups and downs. Fingers crossed things get better for artists, but anytime there's an economic downturn, arts are about the first thing to go, because it's in our country it's viewed as frivolous apparently.
and you know this as well as anybody, but you don't do yourself any favor by focusing on these really long form books that take you years to finish.
No, not at all. I knew going into it, it was what I was getting into. It was going to hurt. But yeah, it's just I guess with a long form book, it was a way. It's like I'm getting older. I do better when I'm able to continue working on a project. I noticed after finishing Skyscrapers of the Midwest, I hit a wall. And that wasn't just because I finished the book, but there were other complications in my life. And it resulted in Driven by Lemons. But I noticed that if I have a project I can keep working on, I don't hit that. It's like I've never given birth to a child, obviously, but it's a like a postpartum depression type thing. It's out, and I have trouble picking myself back up. So I was like, well, if I do a really long series, I won't have to worry about that, which isn't true at all. I've hit all sorts of walls, but you find ways to keep yourself fooled and to keep going,
One of the ways that you were describing it again in the post was that you wanted to finish the current series before you basically lost the ability to draw through old age, which I assume is a little bit maybe jokey or hyperbole, but then there's also some truth to it.
Well, yeah, I'm prone to hyperbole, but I do have carpal tunnel now, and it's getting harder to hold on to a pen. So I'm kind of joking about it, but it's the reality is I have to. I don't know how long I'll be able to hold a pen if I do, I won't be able to draw at the same detail I did when I was younger. So I'd like to, be able to finish Not Away before it's just kind of me holding a pen, leaking pen in my right claw, right, it becomes a claw. And I just, I don't know what's in the future for my body because it's, as you probably know, age isn't exactly kind. Unfortunately, my eyes and my hand and my back, it's,
I have a herniated disc right now and sciatica, so can't really leave my apartment.
Sciatica is terrible.
Yeah, and you get hunched over. Like I bought a cane, and I'm just like, oh yeah, I guess if I didn't know that I was old before, it's very clear to me now.
Yeah. The sitting at a desk has given me all sorts of for a few decades has. My body's reminding me what I've done.
Was it difficult to ask for help initially?
Oh yeah, it goes against my nature. I'd rather I grew up that Puritan work ethic. I grew up in farmland around Midwesterners, so I have it built into me that that fierce independence that's causing a few problems these days. I know where that comes from. So to ask for help doesn't come naturally, at least to a person from rural Missouri. But like I said, I'm determined to work, and I know to make comics work, and I know the comics community. I've been a part of it long enough that I know they care, and we help each other out. And if there's a crowdfunder I can help out with, I do so as well. But I know there are people out there who want to read Not Away. It's not an enormous audience, but I find that they're willing to help me out, so I can continue with the work. But initially, it goes against my nature to do anything like that.
We've known each other for a long time. I've been familiar with your work for a long time. And I think there's a degree to which when somebody's around making things for a while, you start to take them for granted. You take for granted that they're going to make another book. You take for granted that you're going to have another opportunity to have a conversation with them. But I think what you did, and I don't know how intentional it was, but you kind of reminded people that you're here, that you're making work.
Yeah, it wasn't my intention to draw. I'm strange about drawing attention to myself. I'm not great at self promotion, and social media doesn't really work for me because I'm not able to. I'm not able to sell my work. I don't have a salesman in me that I know of. Fanta, they did what they could, but sales, and then there was a lot going on in the world, of course, and I wasn't I wasn't ignorant of everything that's happened in the past 3 or 4 years. But I also, I spent a few thousand hours on a book. I needed to find a way to reach my audience, so I just put that out there because, well, I've lost teeth from stress these past few years and stuff, and anytime other
Is
things.
that true?
I've lost 4 teeth from grinding at night. I finally wisened up and got a mouth brace. But anytime I lost one, I would get on Instagram or something, and I'd say, "Hey, I need help," and people always stepped up, and it's always been that way.
You can't do that 28 times though.
Yeah, but with the Fanta thing, I knew my audience was there from past experience, from past sales and such, that I just didn't feel I was getting through to them. So I just mentioned it, and it was kind of a low for me at that point, because I was just like, I got to keep this going, but I can't figure out how. And
it was a public low, which is the worst kind of low.
Yeah. The one you kind of regret later on. But what happened, and it turned out to be to my benefit, because people stepped up and helped. It's not easy, I guess, just in the society to ask for help. We're expected to be individuals, but I think, like I mentioned earlier, a great thing about the comics community is at least the independent comics community. I can't speak for other communities. They tend to take care of each other.
Yeah, and one of the other things that really resonated with people, and you wrote about this a little bit, was, and I know that this has since been adjusted, and you've had a conversation with Fangraphics, but there's a reason why the numbers are what people latched onto, because I think that, I'm somebody who's covered the industry for a long time. I have a lot of cartoonist friends, but I rarely think about things in terms of the number of units that are sold. So when people can recognize that, Fantagraphics isn't Random House, but they're a huge international corporation. And when a book can sell, I think the number was adjusted to like maybe 120 or something.
Yeah, it was more than 3 or 4. That was just me going by an accounting sheet they gave me, and I got like $35 for the year or something like that. And in my head, I just went this many of book 2, this many of book 1. But it ended up being a little over 100. But there were some return issues that cancel other things out. So.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's more than 100 if you're getting $35 at the end of the day,
Well, yeah, and that's kind of where I was. I was like, it's like I just publishing doesn't seem to be working for me anymore. Or for me, I don't know how it works for other people. Some people are doing fine with comics, but maybe at the same time, we don't know what numbers people are doing. Maybe it's like we don't talk about income, we don't talk about numbers because it's considered impolite, I guess. But I tend to be a little more forthright, and maybe a lot of people out there that I've always assumed were successful that are at my age now. I'm assuming a lot of cartoonists I've always looked up to are just dealing with the same struggles every other cartoonist is dealing with, trying to make it work. It's.
But I also think that there's a big difference between the amount of books people sold in the 90s and the amount of books that people sell today.
Sure. Yeah, that's changing. I try to be optimistic about it, but people just, with digital, it's just not as common. And with digital, I've never made anything from comics. I think my comics do okay on Comixology and stuff, but I get pennies from it, so it really means nothing to the artist. And I guess it's the same thing the actors and stuff are dealing with today. When it comes to digital, they're cut out. And
Spotify is a perfect example.
Spotify is a great example of musicians not getting what's due to them for their efforts. And I'm not to say that I would do well if I was to get all of the stuff I was supposed to get from digital. It's the nature of independent comics and independent anything. It's you don't have a huge PR machine behind you, so it's much more challenging to find your audience, especially in this day and age when there are so many excellent artists, cartoonists, musicians, whatever, that have work to offer. So I don't want to call it noise, but there's so much of it. I think people have difficulty distinguishing between, one one product or next product or work of art or whatever. It's all when it's flying by on their screen, it's all kind of one thing anymore. And that's why I decided to step away from Fana. It's like, well, publishing isn't working for me, and I don't really understand publishing right now. I don't know my place in publishing right now. I know I want to do this book, this series, so I'm just going to continue working on it, not away. You know, if an opportunity, I'm planning on self-publishing, and then if I get enough of the book done and people start showing interest, then maybe I would talk to a publisher. But I'm just going to return to self-publishing right now because I don't think anything else makes sense for me at the moment.
You probably knew this to a certain extent at the time, but it's become very clear to you in hindsight that you got really lucky. You had something really special with Chris and with AdHouse. It was just it was quite literally too beautiful to live, you know?
I really can't say I took it for granted because I've always appreciated Chris, but I think even how much he does for you, for the artists, I didn't understand, and I didn't assume everybody did it. And I know, like with Fanta, like someone like Eric Reynolds, Eric's very passionate about the work he puts out, and he cared very much for my books. And leaving Fantagraphics, actually, you know, talking to Eric about it was the most difficult part of the aspect. But Chris, the special thing about AdHouse is, you know, he just put out a few things a year. He would focus on those few things, and he would sell the hell out of it and promote the hell out of it. And he knew how to do it without annoying people. He knew he could communicate to people how that he loved what he was presenting and that it was special to him, and he wanted to share it with other people. And you could see in the production efforts he put into his work and how he was at a table, you know. And I spent many hours with Chris at tables, and just never going to be another one. You know, you had Koyama, which was similar in its way because Annie's a very special person too.
But she had to step away too. Yeah.
It's after a few years, you have to admit to yourself that this is these are passion projects. They're not realistic when it comes to finances. And I don't, Chris or Annie or any, a lot of people don't concern themselves with that. But you know, there's a limit to how much effort you can put into something. And you know, there's only limited amounts of energy. And Chris and Annie and Eric Reynolds are all very good people for what they do for cartoonists.
What makes it doubly difficult is that by signing to Fantagraphics, you had achieved this like lifelong dream.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was basically, what I wanted to achieve as far as publishing goes. Eventually, I always wanted to get something published by Fantagraphics because in the 90s, it just, when I was reading comics, most of them were Fantagraphics comics, and I think that goes for the same of anybody of our generation that like these kind of comics. So to be published by them was thrilling. It's very, very, very exciting. It's not just Fantagraphics problems. These I've been with them since 2016. And a lot has happened in the world in the past 7 years. It's just. The timing wasn't right, I guess.
I understand the push to self-publish from a financial standpoint, but aren't you effectively just taking on a ton more work?
Yes, I am. And I'm not going to sell as many books this way. It's just I'm basically reseeding, just going to focus on this, have a small audience, sell a few books, and if I feel it gets to the point that I can't handle it. But I like I said, down the road, depending on how Not Away goes, because right now it's a bit of a struggle. But I'm still intent on finishing it, and the future is pretty much wide open for me right now. And self-publishing is just like, okay, I'm going to do this for now until I figure out what's next.
Do you retain the rights to the older books
with Fantagraphics? I talked to Eric. I signed the contract, and when I finally made the decision to part ways, I told him, I was like, I say this fully understanding that I'm under contract. So if you guys legally have to keep publishing, I understand. But he said he wasn't going to hold me to the contract, and that, we agreed to break the contract, and basically they're gonna finish selling the first 2 volumes. And he said if I ever change my mind, the door's open. So it's there's that.
It's like one of those relationships, and you break up with somebody, and you're like, yeah, I don't hate you, it just didn't quite work out.
Yeah, it didn't work out, and which is hard because I like a lot of people at Fantagraphics. A lot of great individuals there. But I don't think there. There's no animosity, and I don't think there are any hard feelings. I think I was clear enough about my frustrations and what was going on that everybody understood.
What does self-publishing entail?
One criticism I received over the past few years, only being able to release a book every 4 or 5 years, was that it just doesn't come out with great enough frequency. And the issue is for me, is Fantagraphics, Notaway isn't. It's a long book that's not really in small chapters, so I never planned on releasing it in smaller pieces and serializing it, just because I'm not writing it that way, But I've started thinking that what my current idea is, it's still rolling around in my head, but I haven't the plans aren't in stone or anything. But my plan is to once a year release the pages that I've done for Notaway. Maybe say 1 year I do 40 pages, next year I do 30 pages, 60 pages, whatever. Then I release that. And in the meantime, along with that release, I'm thinking about doing like a one person anthology type thing, where I collect older work, some things I've done over the year, like short, like anthology pieces, illustrations, stuff like that, and then just release a book yearly. And then when I get enough to release a volume, figure things out from there. But that way, at least annually, I would have something new coming out, rather than radio silence for 5 years and then, just throw the work out to the void. I have to find another way to do it.
Yeah, Craig Thompson has been doing that with his latest. I don't know if you followed that at all. I think it might be through Uncivilized.
It's through Uncivilized. I haven't read it. No, but yeah, it's when I was in like going to Mocha and all that stuff, and like someone would come by the table at that house in like 07, 08. We would try to hand them floppies and like hand people floppies if they were like reviewers or something. Like Chris would. He want to get the book reviewed, and it got to the point where nobody would take. They said, we don't take staples, so anything with staples in it, they wouldn't review. So at that point, people started moving towards, releasing these thicker books, these graphic novels. And now it seems people want smaller quantities at once, so it's just, I can't keep up with market stuff very well. So maybe it's not the right time for an 1,800 page sci-fi comic, but that's the boat I'm in.
Yeah, I think the days of was it Duncan the Wonder Dog might be over at this point.
Yeah, Duncan the Wonder Dog's a good example. But I'm determined. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm determined to finish this comic.
How mapped out is the thing at this point?
I've written everything. I just have to draw it. That's the problem. The drawing takes much longer because I knew it was going to be long when I started it. And I wanted to make sure it had an ending worth working towards. So in order to do that, I had to write it out. I mean, of course, like say when I start working on volume 4, it's not like I know all the dialogue and stuff. I still have to write all of that, but I know the basic story structure. And when I worked for HBO, they needed a Bible. So I actually took the opportunity to type it up. It ended up being like a 60-page document, the whole story. And I was really nervous giving that to them because I knew it would be another 20-some years before I even got to the final book, like writing the final Notaway. So it's only, the information's only out there in one place, but it is written out. It's just, drawing comics, the way I draw comics takes a long time.
Sorry, what was the HBO deal?
Back in 16 or 17, they contacted me wanting to adapt Notaway. They contacted me directly rather than doing through a production company or something. Maybe they were trying something out with one of their executives. But anyway, for about 2.5 years, I worked with HBO and working on. Well, they put me with a showrunner, which I don't know if I can legally talk about who they were, but it was a filmmaker I had a lot of respect for. But it was a very frustrating 2.5 years, and the project fell apart, which was fine by me. By the time I was before my time was even done, I was to the point where I was like, like, I'm stepping back. I really don't want any part of this anymore. It wasn't going the right direction for me, and I was uncomfortable with it.
It sounds like the experience afforded you a lot as far as, mapping it out and like getting paid effectively to work on the story.
It was a great opportunity, and I don't regret doing it. But I've also learned that if anybody should come, with an option again, I'll be sure to draw some boundaries beforehand. But as far as like a learning experience, and yeah, it was invaluable. It was worth it. I'm glad it's in the past.
I think a deal like that, you have to either understand that like nobody gets full freedom over that, Yeah, and if you can be, if you can be zen about it and just appreciate that it's maybe a paycheck that won't come along, but I also understand why you have a lot invested in this thing that you've been working on for a long time.
I'm pretty protective of it, and they knew it from the beginning, but or I expressed it from the beginning. I'm not sure how much of what I say gets through sometimes, but being on the spectrum. Being zen about it, unfortunately, ended up being not possible, and that was the problem because they kept, stepping on my toes.
Thinking about like Driven by Lemons in particular, I have a copy of it somewhere, but I reread some of it through your blog, and it's pages and pages of text scrawl. When you go back and look at some of your work, like knowing this thing about yourself now, does it make more sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because reevaluated both Skyscrapers is about growing up autistic, and Driven by Lemons is about having autistic meltdowns. And I didn't know what was happening at the time. I just knew I was experiencing something that was not necessarily unique, but affecting me very much. And those two books were my way of. That's how I use art. That's how I use comics, is a means of figuring things out. Infinite Cuck, I don't know if you read that, as I was really struggling with what's been happening the past couple of years with the pandemic and the insurrection and everything. And I wanted to work on Nodaway, but the only way I could move forward was get this out of my system. So, but yes, I've considered going back, and they're out of print now, Skyscrapers and Lemons, and I've considered not annotating, but noting that I wrote these about autism without knowing what was wrong with me. I was just trying to figure it out. And both were crucial to me finally getting to the point where I understood what it was. It was all part of the process. And if I didn't have art, I don't know what I would do, because that's the only way I figure things out.
I think there's a lot of value in talking about this, and I think you've taken some good first steps again with the work that you're doing on the blog, but honestly, there's a way here to appeal to a lot more people. I don't know quite how to connect the dots there, but the fact that it is this experience that you had, that a lot of people have, and that a lot of people when we were younger, it wasn't diagnosed as much as it is now. It's never really been diagnosed that much in women. Like all sorts of.
Well, there's just so much more understanding. I'm sure you've read up on it.
But also, it's like as very difficult to get diagnosed later in life.
It is. The diagnosis itself, when I was still trying to figure things out, and a couple of years after I had self-diagnosed, because they say it's okay, so I don't go around telling people I'm autistic, but I'm pretty sure I'm autistic.
Yeah.
It got to the point where I wanted to get diagnosed because I needed some people that close to me to believe me, because one of the problems of being adult autistic is you've been masking and getting along for so long.
You're high functioning.
You're high, yeah. So they don't see that you're actually, it's quite a struggle, and all the depression and stuff and anxiety I experience, and other people in the spectrum experience is from not being able to conform. So I finally decided to get the diagnosis, and I read how difficult it was, and how you had to go through so many stages, and how it was so expensive, because they primarily just helped white rich kids, specifically boys, like you were saying.
Generally, it's easier to get covered as a kid than as an adult. with the
Yeah, sure,
diagnosis.
sure. There's that too. So but here in the middle of rural Missouri, there's not even a psychiatrist within 100 miles. A therapist. So I was like, well, what do I do? Who do I talk to? So I remember growing up, my an ex-girlfriend, her brother was autistic, and I always enjoyed being around him. And I remember he lived in a community about 30 miles from here with other neurodivergent, mentally disabled people. So I was like, well, maybe there's someone up there. And I looked up there, and there was a person that's qualified to diagnose. And I just sat down with her for a couple hours, my wife and I, and she asked me a bunch of, and we met a few times and everything, and she ended up diagnosing me. But I didn't have to go through all the rigmarole.
I was recently formally diagnosed with OCD. There's a lot of overlap between the two.
Sure. Yes. Comorbidities. Yeah. OCD is difficult.
I don't know how much you know about OCD, but
I'm OCD.
I don't have to explain this to you, but when people think of OCD, they think of the C in OCD. They think of the compulsions. They think of like flipping light switches on and off and all these things. And that's all accurate, but
yeah, sure.
The O is the really scary part about it. And that, I think, has been a very valuable thing to me, of realizing that having, it sounds really silly saying it out loud, but just having a thought doesn't make you a terrible person.
I don't think it's silly, because I agree. Because those words, OCD, autism, they can only define so much. But to have that word, you can look at what's behind the problem, of what's creating it, and it helps. It can really, really help to understand that it's not your fault. It's because that's one of the things that's bothered me all my life. Is just like, it's like everybody tells me I'm okay, but so I must be doing something wrong myself, and you tend to start internalizing and blaming yourself for things that are physiologically out of your control. So I understand that completely.
I'm not an astrology person. I don't, if people are into astrology, that's great. I don't have any issues with it. I'm not personally, but I liken it to like one day just getting the most accurate horoscope of your life. Where like, you read down the list and you're like, oh, if I had known this 20 years ago, things would be different.
My life would be completely different if I would have received some diagnoses in my teens. But I'm sure my parents feel some guilt for not being able to help me when I was younger, but the information wasn't there. It's still not here. I had to bring it. I had to figure it out myself. And that's what a lot of us are doing, is figuring it out for ourselves. Just to have a name for it, and to think, okay, this is something that's out of my control. Let me worry about the things I can control. And then things might balance out a little bit better.
You had said that the valuable thing for diagnosis for you was that there were people in your life who wouldn't believe it without it. When you were able to sort of show them this, when you were, I guess, validated, whatever the right word is, were they surprised?
Some people close to me still don't believe it. It's been a difficult time as far as that goes, but yes, they just were unsure until I was like, this piece of paper signed says I'm autistic level 1. It's like, I swear to you, I'm not making this shit up. And yeah, there was surprise. It's like I was right. It's like, and there's no vindication in that. I don't feel vindicated. I just want people. I think everything I do is just working towards understanding. And I've had difficulty with communicating people all my life. Like, you and I are sitting here talking fine, but I can't articulate exactly what I want to say typically.
When we were talking about doing this a few months ago, you said, I can't right now.
Yeah. And I have to be able to tell people, and some people don't take it kindly. They get upset if I say I can't. Some people don't like to be told no, but it's something I've learned. And especially since I've been diagnosed, I was like, okay, I know I am this, whatever this term actually means. I'm not wrong. So I can draw boundaries more easily, knowing that I'm in the right, by saying my mind can't handle this right now, and it's important for everybody to do that. I think we aren't people get offended if you do it, and it shouldn't really be that way. We should be able to listen to each other and say, okay, let's try again later. Yes, and yeah, it's just back then I had a couple people reach out to me about interviews, just because everything that was happening. It was very frustrating because I'm talking about I need to reach a bigger audience or my audience, but I can't. My body and mind won't cooperate, and it's so dang frustrating.
Even like making a conscious decision to get off social media is not a thing that everybody does.
I don't want to get too grim, but I've been pretty low in my life, and Driven by Lemons is about pulling myself out from these depths where I want to be straightforward, so I'll say I deal with suicidal ideation if I get low enough, and it's not when I say that people think I think people have a cartoony movie idea of what suicidal ideation is. It's because it's not something I want in my head. It's a compulsion. It's related to OCD, I believe, where it's just like, okay, well you probably ought to do this. You ought to take care of this.
It's an obsessive thought.
It's an obsessive thought. It's casual, and I think it feels separate from me, and that's what makes you feel crazy.
I think that this is all super useful, helpful for people who, especially for people who like don't have that word for it.
I want to help. Yeah, I want to help people because that's what's helped me realize, or once having the diagnosis has helped me realize so many things. I can see in the comics industry how many of us are on the spectrum, and how you can.
Are you kidding me?
Sometimes, yeah, right, exactly. I mean, in the creative art, in the arts at all, you're going to find far more.
Yeah, but there's something about comics as a solitary act.
Things in boxes, man. Yeah,
and things in boxes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a solitary act that you can do all day. You never get tired of it. And you get to organize information, and that's a great feeling for people on the spectrum. And I've realized that I'm drawn to comics because it's my natural way of organizing information. These past few years have just gotten so heavy that this stuff is triggering me over and over again, and it's just from scrolling.
Creating and consuming are two different things, but obviously they're linked. You just one day you just decided, this just needs to stop for a while, and I just need to not log into Instagram or whatever.
And then it's like what I was going back to earlier. It's like before I wasn't able to draw lines for myself. I just keep going, but I realize I'm a person that needs lines drawn, and I have to say social media is making me sick right now. I need to step away from it. It's like I don't need suicidal ideation from looking at a tablet or a cell phone. It's silly to put myself in this situation, to just constantly feel like I'm being hit, by, especially on some of those bad news days from the past couple of years. And it's not, I'm not hiding from it. But I have to protect myself from it because I can't function at all if it keeps hitting me, So for my distancing from social media is just, I can't. I love seeing other people's work. It makes me so happy to be around, see other artists and everything. But when it comes to the socio-political aspect, the dominance of white supremacy and fascism, the rhetoric anyway on social media is incredibly disturbing for me. I can't. I want to change it, and there's nothing I can do to change it. But staying on there is making me feel sick. I can't do it. I have to step away.
Even if you want to get away from it while you're on there, the algorithm won't let you.
The algorithm, man, it gets me. It knows it's just punishing. I can't. If it's not going to be responsible, I'm not going to get involved.
Everybody not everybody. Maybe everybody. Most people experience some form of it over the last 3 years.
I'd say in these last few years, if people haven't experienced burnout, then I don't know how they're doing it.
Yeah, certainly everybody's experienced it at some point in their life. But I have this sense that autistic burnout and like neurotypical burnout are not the same thing. But I don't know what the distinction is.
I'd have to think about it. I would say that they're very similar. It's just autistic takes it to a point where you begin to shut down emotionally or psychologically and physically. You're tired, you're exhausted, it keeps happening, you can't step away. Everybody has their threshold. I guess maybe a threshold where you're able...
Well, you're talking about the difference between being able to function and not being able to function.
It's a matter. I mean, I think a lot of people experiencing burnout these few years, they're still able to push through and deal with the burnout. Autistic burnout is to the point where you can't function anymore, and it's dangerous because you could get to the point of a meltdown. And a meltdown is when a burnout has gone so long that your body's like, okay, well, if you're not going to take care of this, I'm going to. And the meltdowns are the worst. Burnout leads to meltdown, and that's what Driven by Lemons was about. And I had another meltdown while I was creating Infinite Cuck. Infinite Cuck, I know, is like, it's a humorous satire, but I was really, really low when I made that comic, and I had a meltdown while I was making it. And but I would say that's the main distinction is typical burnout doesn't hospitalize you, whereas neurodivergent burnout, if you don't monitor it and take care of it, you could wind up in danger. You lose complete control over your mind and body. It's terrible.
Throughout any of this, did you ever consider leaving comics, or at least, an extended hiatus?
Yes. I was doing pretty well after Driven by Lemons. I was feeling a lot better. I met my wife, and she's an artist, and I found that having a relationship with another artist was a very healthy thing for me, because they understand the time you need, the mental time, the studio time, everything else. So it was a healthy relationship, and I was doing well. And I was getting Nodaway to a point where I was actually going to start writing it. I started writing it back in '08. I was going to start like writing dialogue and breaking things down. And we had a fire in Chicago, our apartment fire. It caught fire, and we basically, long story short, we were without a home for a few months. We couch surfed, and we finally made it back to here in Missouri, where we built a house. But that was even a few months later. During that time, I was already kind of seriously considering stepping away, because I was frustrated with, comics. It's frustrating. You can't make a living at it, and there's a vocal population that hates your work online, and it's just why am I doing this? What's the purpose? I may as well just be creating for myself. But I after the fire, and we were building the house, there was a period of 2 years there where I just had no routine, and not making comics felt pretty good. The longer it went on, it's like, do I need to return to this? Do I want to keep doing this to myself? And after my son was born, after that 2-year period, we finished building the house. My son was born a week later, and I was like, okay, well, I better do something, I guess. And I was like, if I'm going to make this art thing work, I could either, do painting, which is difficult, or I could do comics, which I've been doing for a long time. And it's difficult, but I do love it, and my love brought me back around to making Nodaway. But there was a couple of years there where I considered not coming back to doing anything.
Ultimately, there was a little bit of, it's funny to say, but like there was some financial incentive in it.
Well, I was either that, or since we moved back here, I would have to work at a factory full time, because that's about all there is around here is factories and farms. So I was like, do I want to spend all my energy in a factory and then draw afterwards, or do I make this work? And it's like, I can't say I'm making it after. That was about the decision too. The time where I told you I haven't worked since 2012, like a regular job. I was like, I can either do this factory thing, or I can draw. And I was like, I have to make comics work, because I don't know how to do anything else. So, besides clean out grease traps or stock groceries, which, it's like everybody,
those are
somebody
useful
has
skills.
to do it.
Yeah.
And I've done it before, and I'd rather not anymore. So I'm still doing my best to make this work,
I can think of one obvious downside of, not being able to attend shows like you used to, but how much does location actually matter when you do what you do?
I don't know. I'm not so sure it matters. It's hard to say, because I don't know. There's so many factors that have changed my relationship to the comics industry, quote unquote, these past few years. So it's hard for me to say, but I felt those first few years, especially working on Nottoway, I could be anywhere doing that. And that's one of the reasons why I moved home and moved back to this area. And my partner was willing to, because you're able to. Living in Chicago, rent's expensive, and I have to work full time just to have an apartment where I may have some energy left over to make comics. And that's where I was in 2010 or so. I was like, I'm getting older. I'm in my at that point, or early mid 30s, and I was like, at that point, even I started noticing I wasn't having as much energy. I couldn't pull all nighters like I used to. I couldn't do stuff like that. And I was like, okay, I have to find a different way. So that's the reason primarily we moved back here, is we built our own house, my wife and I, to save money, and just we did whatever we could to save money. And once we have this house and this studio space, then we can pay property taxes. No one will bother us, and we can just stay here and work on our stuff, one of the ways we're able to make it work is we don't have to pay rent and stuff. But we're in a very privileged position where my family, bought land 100 years ago here, and it's not everybody can move to the country and build a house. I'm fully aware of that, but since we were in a unique position to do so, we decided to. And that's one of the ways I'm able to make it work, is I don't have a lot of. It's very cheap living here is one of the benefits of, say, versus living in Chicago. I have to have a job or two in Chicago, whereas here I can get by without one.
You mentioned that there aren't any therapists nearby. Is there any kind of artistic community that you're able to participate in?
No, there's nothing. I have no community here. All community I have is through keeping in touch with people online. I lived in Kansas City for many years, and it's south of here, about 70 miles. So once every so often we go down there, and I have old friends there that are still part of the art community. So I consider them my art community, and I consider the comics community my community. But it's one of the reasons why I do want to get to shows occasionally, because it's the only way I can really get around other like-minded people. It's isolating here, but comics and being an artist is an isolating thing, and we're raising kids, so we wouldn't be doing much socially anyway. It's working out fine right now, but I'd say the primary deficiency we have is lack of any sense of community. What
an absolute modern nightmare it is that social media is the cause of, so much so much burnout and so many terrible feelings, but it's also this lifeline that you've had. Yeah, well, it's the only way I have to stay in touch with people, and that's why I hate to say love hate, because I don't really love it, but I want to be in touch with these people in my community. And really, social media is the only way. And I think the most frustrating thing about social media, or the internet in general, is we have the capacity now to achieve so much, and we have so much available to us, and we default squander it on hate and arguing, and it drives me nuts. It's like we have everything we need at this point to progress, if true progress is possible as a civilization, and we're squandering it. And that's what kills me right now. Is just, it makes me unbearably sad that you feel powerless as you see this happen. I don't know. I hope we learn a little online maturity and how we deal with each other online, and civility, because there's very little civility in what we do. Not you and I, of course, but just in general, we all we have our moments. Go on Twitter, yeah, we have our individual moments, of course. But it's to realize the potential and actually utilize the potential of having not infinite, but it's going to feel like it to a human, infinite information in your pocket. It's I don't know. Maybe we need to be more grateful for what we actually have, and I think it's easy to take all of this for granted. Does working on this book, does making comics, is that still a source of excitement for you? Very much. Yeah, I do everything I can to make it so I can sit here at this chair every day, because it's what I really want to do. And this year has been very frustrating. I've only gotten about 5 pages of Nottoway done because I've had to pick up so many freelance projects. It's just, it's like I know my project is there. I want to work on it, but I have to make ends meet.
first. I don't want to relegate it to hobby level, but I don't feel I have a choice. You know, as an adult, as a father, as a partner, I have to hold up my end and make sure that's taken care of before I do something as frivolous as make comics, because apparently it's frivolous to do this. I just, in an ideal world, I'd be able to sit down and make comics every day and make a living. But we live very far from an ideal world, at least in my eyes.